Okay. Oh my gosh, I think it's finally gonna work this time. I'm not even kidding. This is like the 18 billionth time I've tried to do this. Okay. Hi, I'm Layla, in case we forgot. And today I'm gonna be talking us through script selection. So I'm gonna go ahead and share my screen and I'm going to pull up that PowerPoint that we were looking at earlier in the week when we were introducing the different interp events. And I'm going to talk about them in relation to how you can find scripts for these guys. So starting with HI, something important to note about HI is that the scripts can be pretty lenient because you can really do anything with the script. Like your script doesn't necessarily have to be funny for your HI to be really good because you can make different lines and different characters funny by exaggerating body movements and voices and, just the way that you deliver lines can be the difference between a good and bad HI. So some of the examples that we have for scripts here are finding them in things like graphic novels, children's books, movie scripts, plays, and then of course just regular books. You can go ahead and find them there. What I would suggest is thinking about like different comedy movies that you like, or even dramatic movies that happen to have funny moments, and kind of try to pull some inspiration from them. You don't necessarily have to do your piece on that, but it kind of helps you get a good idea. So something that I notice a lot of people think is that they have this like misconception that HI is like a stand-up comedy, but it's not. And your plot has to be cohesive, right? So you want to have a solid plot line that happens to have funny moments in it, if that makes any sense. You don't just want to get up there and pull together the most random things you can because it'll make the audience laugh. Like, yes, it'll make the audience laugh, but that's not going to be a great piece because you won't really have a plot line. It'll just be joke after joke after joke. So try to think of some books, movies, whatever that you might have seen or read that have a cohesive plot line but can be funny, and think about how you can interpret that. And then yeah, okay. I think that's it for each eye. If you have any questions, let me know. Oh, please, for the love of God, load. I'm really sorry if it's like looking weird from your screen. I've like genuinely been trying to do this all day and it just has not been working. Okay, so DI is a little bit different from HI because you don't have multiple characters, right? So whatever script you end up choosing, you want to have a central character. So what I would oh God, is looking through things like plays, books, short stories, memoirs, and autobiographies, and then sometimes movies. The main difference here is that whatever you choose, you want to have minimal dialogue just because it's hard to cut out a lot of dialogue and keep a cohesive plot line because you won't really have dialogue in your piece. Like any conversations that you have in a DI is usually one-sided, right? So you can imply to your audience what the other person might respond with, but you're not actually acting as that character as well. So whatever script you choose, just remember that um, you're playing it from one perspective. So you're not switching characters and you're not really expressing other characters' views. So think about that a little. And I'll talk about like where you can find published works because every script you have has to be published. But we'll do that towards the end. So these next two are a little bit weird. Duo and duet are unique because you have two people, so you can have more than two characters. I would suggest looking at movies, books, and plays for this. They're just probably the best areas to pull a script. But they're different, of course. So starting with duet. Um, Duet is kind of like a play almost. So you can have multiple scene changes, but you want to have kind of like a central scene rather than like a central character. This is kind of this is more of like a two-person thing. So you don't want to have like a main character, but two main characters, if that makes any sense. And you have to keep in mind that whenever you change scenes, you do have these chairs that you also have to change scenes with. So however you end up changing your scenes, you have to remember that they're going to move every time, because that's how you signify a scene change. So I think plays and movies usually work best for duets, just because there is a lot of dialogue that can help you form that cohesive story arc. And plays generally have less scenes, right? So for instance, I did a duet with my friend Claire this past year. And our main scene was kind of in a car. So we had some different scenes where like they were in a gym at one point and we used the chairs as like bikes that you would see at SoulCycle. And then another scene, we had them in a restaurant, we had them doing job interviews and at a club, but like our central area was that car. And then duo, excuse me, is a little different because you can be a little more abstract with this one. This is the one where you can have a lot of characters. And I'm not saying you have to stick to 2 characters for a duet, but it's typically easier. For duo, a lot of what we see is like one person will play a sole character who's the main character, and then another person will play like a lot of supporting characters. And that's pretty easy to find in movies and books, because books and movies usually have a single character that they focus on, and then everyone else is like supplementing actors around it. So that's really cool to do. And then you also don't have chairs, so you're able to transition from scene to scene a little bit easier, which really helps facilitate like how many scenes you have. So you have a lot of liberty there, and it can be really abstract. It doesn't have to be like in a specific script or play. And with both of these, you can kind of introduce that HI thing, like popping, and introducing a lot of different characters as well. So poi is going to be a little bit different from all of these because you have a little bit of everything in poi. You have prose, poetry, articles, you can use blogs, podcasts, plays, movies, really whatever you want in poi as long as it's published. And also finding a script for poi is going to be a little bit different from everything else, because you have that thread piece, if we remember, which is like the main character and like the main idea that you want to convey to your audience. So what I would suggest is finding a piece that you're really passionate about and setting that as your thread piece. So it can be, usually it's a prose, but it really can be anything. Like my thread piece this past season was a poetry that I just fell in love with, and I formed the rest of my piece around that. So what I would suggest is first coming up with an idea that you want to talk about, or a problem that you want to talk about, and then do some research. Go through poetries, articles, books, anything that you've like seen or read that talks about that. And if it really sticks out to you and you're really passionate about that specific piece, make that your thread piece, because then once you have that, it's really easy to kind of pick the rest of those pieces that are going to supplement and contrast that main piece, which is something different in poise, that you want a lot of different perspectives. Because as fun as it is to play all these characters that have, you know, the same view and opinion, it gets really redundant and generally boring for the audience. So it's really good to provide contrast. So for instance, my piece this past year was about sexual assault on college campuses. And my thread piece was a poem about this girl who's at a party and wasn't receiving any attention until she received unwanted attention. And I had supplementing pieces of another victim and an advocate for change. And then I also had an antagonist in my piece of the college campuses that aren't really doing much to help. So you want to provide a lot of different perspectives. And it's really easy to find articles, prose, and poetries about it, especially if you're talking about just a stronger, like more prominent topic, which I'm not saying you have to, but yeah, so definitely choose a topic first, find your thread piece, and then build around it. And that's how you're going to weave. And then also remember that this does not necessarily have to be a sob story either. It can be a dramatic piece with comedic effect. It can be, usually we don't see like comedic poise, but it's definitely possible if that's how you want to do it. Yeah, so if you have any questions about how a poi works, I know this one's a little bit complicated, but we're all here to help. Okay, and then lastly, we have prose and poetry. So prose, I would compare to DI almost. Really, the only difference here is that it's shorter. You have a binder, and you don't have as much freedom with your blocking because where your feet are planted is where you want to stay. So your blocking in prose will be mostly waist up. But obviously it's in the name. To find scripts, I would look for memoirs, short stories, and autobiographies just because you want that single character as well. So you can have like one-sided conversations in this as well, like implying what the other person is saying to the audience, but you're giving a single perspective. So it's just easier to find works that were written from first person. And then poetry is a little bit different. It also has the idea of weaving, like poi. The only difference here is that all of those are going to be poetries. And you can do this a couple different ways. Like once you've chosen that topic, you can either choose a thread piece that you want to build around, or you can choose a couple of pieces that you want to focus on. But you're free to either add an antagonist point of view or have your pieces like supplementing with like slightly different views. Just remember that you want to engage your audience so that you're not like repeating yourself over and over and over from different perspectives. And then you can use your pages to signify like different character changes here as well, the same in poi. You're not doing that popping, and just because you're using multiple poems doesn't mean that you have to have multiple characters. Like you can kind of, you're free to work with it however you want, and it's really abstract as well. I've personally never done a poetry, but I know a lot of the intro girls have. I've watched a few. I'm not like an expert on it, but I can answer any questions, and then if your question exceeds my knowledge, I know Isabel is really good at poetry. So yeah. And then as for where you can find scripts, so everything has to be published. And yeah, okay, so I've got some links here of where you can find some different scripts and published works. The first two are like NSDA approved websites. So the NSDA is the National Speech and Debate Association. And not only does your script have to be published, but approved as well. So this first link is going to be the website list of where you can look for scripts. But if you've already found a script from a specific website and you want to make sure that it's approved, instead of scrolling through that long list, there's a Google search engine that I have here where you can look up the website that you found your script from. Excuse me. And yeah, you can do that. And then the rest of these are all just those individual websites that you can see on that list. Not all of them, but a lot of them. Different play websites, poetry websites, got the Poetry Foundation, Poets. Oh, one thing that I forgot to mention, when you are looking for poetry, one of the biggest flaws that I think I see is like we all just kind of like go to our Google search engine and are like poems about yada yada, like whatever topic we're talking about. The biggest issue that you're going to run into there is that you're going to find a lot of good poems about that topic, but then you'll find that they're not NSDA approved or published even. So to prevent that, what I would suggest is going to some of the approved websites like Poetry Foundation and either using their like search engine to look for poems about whatever you want to talk about, or even doing some research on those about some different poets who focus on different topics that you're interested in, and then scrolling through their published works to help. That way you don't like fall in love with a poem and then are not able to use it. And then the rest of these are the same thing. They're all like where you can find scripts. Script City is good. We usually use Scriptfly. And then for poi, You can also use TED Talks because those are published transcripts. So when you want to include, if you want to include like an informational voice in your ploy, that would be a really good one to go with if you find one about whatever you want to talk about. The American Life I've used before for finding transcripts for like duos. There's a long list, and if you guys are interested in any of these links, I can of course share them with you. So just yeah, let me know. And then that's kind of like a general gist of how it's going to go. Of course, like once you've found a script, you're going to want to probably consult with one of the officers about whether or not it's going to work for what you're intending to do with it. And so just kind of look back to this video and remember like what different requirements you should be hitting for each interp event. Think about whether it'll work with your script, and then bring it to us if you're not sure. But I believe in you guys. You definitely got this. Oh, so glad this worked. Okay. Yeah, if you have any questions, feel free to ask. And yeah, okay, bye.